A very well-known risk manager told me 2 or 3 years ago that WCI is where workers' compensation ideas are born and developed. That was really high praise for our convention. Our industry keynote is the point of the spear when it comes to new ideas. For the last 7 years, it's been moderated by 2 of the most significant influencers in the that's, by the way, the first time I've ever used the word influencers. So it should be noted. 2 of the most significant influencers in the workers' compensation arena, the power couple of workers' compensation, Kimberly George and Mark Walls. Kimberly is the global head of innovation and product development for Sedgwick, and Mark is the vice president of client engagement for Safety National. This special edition of their well-followed program, Outfront Ideas, is on the topic of technology transformation. To present their panel in this timely topic, please welcome to the stage Kimberly George and Mark Walls.
Welcome, everyone. For those of you standing in the back, there's lots of seats over here.
All right, I'm Kimberly George, co-host of Outfront Ideas with Kimberly and Mark. We are so happy to be here today. WCI is my favorite conference of the year, and it's really because of you and all of those who come to learn and share and collaborate with one another. If you're not familiar with Outfront Ideas, Mark and I come together each year and pick 20 topics that we believe the industry needs to focus on. These aren't our individual company needs. They're the needs of our industry. And you've heard us up here for many years talk about being better together. If our industry is to evolve, to meet the needs of the constituents and each of you as stakeholders, we need to think big. We need to become comfortable with the uncomfortable and make change happen. And in this topic, one of our issues to watch for 2023, technology transformation. If you don't take note, someone else will. The chair with which you sit today will be with a disruptor sitting there in the next 2, 3, and certainly 5 years. So we selected this topic because it's meaningful to all of us, whether you're a physician, in a law practice, a risk manager, a claims manager, a payer, a service provider. So we hope that today you're able to find some nuggets of inspiration to do just what Steve said, take it back to your desk. And before I hand it over to Mark for introduction of our guests, I do want to thank WCI, Jim and Steve and Andrew, for affording us an opportunity to bring this topic, and to you, the audience, for being here. So, Mark, let's get started.
All right, we've got a great panel joining us today. Let's start by meeting with them. And Scott, introduce yourself.
Good morning, Scott Rogers, Chief Client Officer for Sedgwick Claims.
Julie.
Good morning, Julie Layton, Risk Management Segment Leader at Marsh.
Vin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vin Fotheringham. I'm the CEO of Partners Risk Strategies.
I think it's important to point out that both Vin and Julie served in risk management roles for several years with many different companies before their current position, so they bring quite a variety of background to them.
And I just want to say, Sean Jackson with Panda Group sends his regrets. He wanted to be here, but with 200 retail properties in the midst of Hurricane Hillary, he needed to be with his company and wasn't able to travel.
And then they had an earthquake just to top it all off, so much fun. All right, let's get started. Our first topic is what is standing in the way of progress? The workers' compensation industry always seems to lag from a technology standpoint. What's getting in the way? And Vin, let's start with your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think when you think about workers' comp, I think it's a broader issue, right? So you think about the insurance industry as a whole, you think about how it started, You think about Lloyd's of London and the coverage that started with Lloyd's and the process of going to the box, right? They still do that today. And so from an insurance perspective, across all of our industries, we're rooted in process, and it's rooted in tradition. And so as technology comes about, we seem to be, as an industry, one of the slowest adopters to it. You know, we were talking earlier about the medical industry. Their bill processing processes and other things that happen quicker and faster. But when you think about what happens with workers' comp, it becomes a burden. The process is very, very burden laden. It's very, very manual. You think about the concerns that the injured worker has, and it has to do with transparency related to the process. Think about all the phone calls that all you adjusters in the room have that injured workers call you about day in and day out. It's about getting paid and making sure that their claims is covered, right? So if you can go online and order a pizza from Domino's and see the pizza tracker and know when the pizza tracker is going to deliver the pizza to your house, why couldn't there be something similar where an employee with an injured worker knowing exactly and having that type of transparency to understand exactly where he or his or hers claim is in part of the process? So how do we leverage the technology and all the things that are available today in order to put a process in place so that the worker has transparency, the level of transparency that he or she needs? Could result in lower litigation. Think about all the predictive analytics and the artificial intelligence that we have now for better reserving, better claim processes, quicker, faster processes. Those are the things that we're so slow to adopt, but we need to get to a point where we're able to leverage that so that we can improve things for ourselves.
Yeah, I think those are great points. And you heard Vin speak about a few of the things that we've discussed from this stage in past years for this industry keynote. Bureaucracy in workers' comp, the need for talent to be engaged. We'll hit on some of these topics further as we go along. Julie, what do you see impeding change?
Well, I don't know. I like change, but you go first. Right? Many times that's how we look at it. We don't want to be on the cutting edge. Is it fear? Are we afraid to discover something new? Do we hold ourselves and create our own barriers, potentially? Is it the control that we like? You know, we feel that we can execute it better, or we don't want to give up control because of a variety of different reasons. So I think with the way that we look at change, I think in general is we wait sometimes for others to vet it through or to make it proven or so that we can trust it, or we simply don't want to be out there as the pioneer. But technology is coming at such a fast rate that I think without changing and adapting to those changes and embracing it and asking new questions, seeking discovery on our own and self-starting as it relates to technology, we're leaving ourselves behind, and we're not recognizing that it can be a competitive advantage, not only for our businesses and our departments, for us personally in our careers. There's not much pushing kind of change and innovation in workers' compensation inside of our own organizations. It's viewed maybe as a necessary evil, right? We have to take care of our injured workers. The costs are relatively stable. So no one's really pushing us, perhaps, to ask new questions. How do we solve the solutions that are out there that technology, how do we take discovery of those solutions? I sit through many client meetings where maybe they're complaining about their claim performance, or they're looking at it's really hard to keep an adjuster on the desk. We have a lot of turnover. But I very rarely hear us asking new questions about how new technologies might be able to answer kind of some of the old problems. We stick to what we're comfortable with, and that's where I think adapting to change We can't wait with technology for everyone else to go first.
Yeah, Julie, I want to have a follow-up question. You've, in your risk management role, oftentimes took those risks to move your company's programs along. And I know there's risk managers in the audience that may think, well, my business isn't ready for it. You personally, what drove you and what gave you the confidence to be an early adopter and to push, whether it's your claims model, your risk?
Yeah. I think for me, a lot of times what I did was I didn't look at risk management and my goals. I knew what my goals were: to elevate risk management in the organization, create better value and savings and all of that. But I looked at what are my organization's goals, and I began to take discovery inside my organization and then translated how could risk and how could claims contribute to what my organization was driving after. And that actually made the conversation easier, because not only was I asking them what's important to them, but I was finding a way for risk management to play a role in that. And I would retreat and really think through that, and then I would come back at it. And I often talk about how I grew, when I was at Office Depot, I grew a team of 19 people, and at Kohl's, 32 people, because I continuously found the way to add value to the organizational's goals and therefore achieve both my personal goals and departmental goals at the same time. The last thing that I'll say is I also took tremendous discovery. I always told my team, if you want to learn what's cutting edge and happening, invite every vendor into the room. Talk to your peers. Often we shut those things down. We're too busy. We're dealing with this. We're only a party of one. You have to find the time to know what's out there and the possibilities that you might be able to create for your own organization.
Thanks.
Scott, what do you see inhibiting change?
Yeah, so interesting. So great points by the panelists. And Julie has always been a change agent in the industry. Everyone knew her as a trailblazer and everything she did. We need more people like that really want to take a risk. It's risk management. It's not risk aversion, right? And it feels like there's a little bit of that has set in. And I don't know if maybe it's the control that people want, the process, bureaucracy. Maybe people just love the predictability of it all. But it's just it's a reluctance or fear of change, which is frankly frustrating. I think, Vinny talked about you can track a pizza, but you don't want to use technology to get an injured worker back to health and back to work. Why would you not want to do that? And for me, it's being on the service side, the provider side. It's frustrating because the technology does exist. The innovation is there, right? And time and time again, we have these conversations, and you have a conversation, whether it's at the lobby bar or outside this room, and you start talking about, okay, here's some of the cool stuff that's going on, and it's not a competition of, Sedgwick versus others. It's really from an industry perspective, what is out there, what is available, and when and how do we embrace it? And people get excited about it, but when it comes time to actually do it, it's almost like cold feet. It's the strangest thing, there is great innovation out there today. There's great technology out there today. There are ways to do things in a super efficient, super effective, cool, calm way that if we just embrace it, give it a shot and give it a chance, we could roll it out immediately. So I think it's just there's a, to Vinny's point, it's the industry. It's not comp. Comp is a subset of the insurance industry, which is just slow moving. Again, they've done it this way for 100 years. We joked about the Titanic being written in the book at Lloyd's, still there. And that's kind of funny, but it's kind of weird at the same time, right? Everything you do is on a little phone right here, but we don't want to embrace that to get an injured worker back to health. So I just think it's a reluctance to change, a little bit too much risk aversion as opposed to risk management. Yeah. Not a criticism, it's just a thing.
Yeah.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
I think one of the things we need to, risk management as technicians, we need to embrace that level of change. And when you think about the comfort level that we all have in our process, and we think about what is our value to the organization, to your point, Julie. And if you're rooted, and this is my call out for all the risk managers, right? If you're rooted in your worth making the transaction to save premium, right? That's not where your value is. So I'm assuming that some folks in the room have been, they've been part of the soft market, now they're in the hard market, and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I create value? Embracing the technology and taking the chance, whether you do a small pilot on a subset of your employees or your employee group, do something and challenge yourself to do something different. If you sit around and do the same old, your value is going to come and go, right? The transaction piece of this, of what we do as risk managers, is the easiest part of what we have to do. It's time for us to embrace the change, roll up our sleeves, embrace the technology, and put something different in place that you can show the value to your company.
Yeah, very well said.
Kimberly, can I jump on top of you there?
Back to you,
Keep going
Scott.
all day. Here we go. No, I something strange happened to Julie's point about the necessary evil, or comps the necessary evil. It's a statutory benefits, all this other stuff. This strange little thing called the pandemic over the last 3 or 4 years caused us to behave and think differently. We had to embrace innovation. We had to embrace different kinds of technology. Why? Human beings weren't in the building. They were at home. We weren't in the building. We were at home. And all this technology was infused into the process. Well, telemed, something like that the industry has been reluctant for years to go after. All of a sudden, it became almost the norm. So the pandemic caused us, didn't allow us, caused us to think differently. And as quickly as the pandemic is starting to end, we're starting to move back into our old habits. And it literally frustrates me that we continue to do that, because it is there, it does exist today. And the other great thing that happened throughout the pandemic is people stopped worrying about it being workers' compensation, right? They're like, we don't care. We don't care about the process. We don't care about the form, the EDI. My employee, my valuable colleague or resource for our organization is not healthy and not at work today. What do we do to take care of them? They ignored all the process, whether it was occupational or not. They're like, just get my folks healthy and back. And we should continue to embrace that mentality, the technology and innovation component of it, but looking at people as human beings, not necessarily a statutory benefit.
No, I think that's a good point. And the ecosystem with which we all work, bringing the stakeholders to the table, is really what it's all about, because our technology has so much integration across the system, and that's why it's important each of us do our part to transform technology. Before I go into some use case scenarios and tech that's being deployed, Mark, will you share the carrier point of view around change?
Sure, we see a few things from the carrier point of view getting in the way. First and foremost is those fearsome legacy claim systems. They've got billions of years worth of data and hundreds of billions of claims in there, and making changes to those systems is costly and challenging. Part of the challenge comes into the fact that so many carriers are publicly traded companies, and so they are evaluated by their shareholders every quarter based on their profitability, based on them hitting certain numbers. And quite frankly, your shareholders don't want to hear you say, we're going to put $1 billion investment in technology today, and it's going to hurt our bottom line, but in 5 years, that's going to pay off for you. They don't want to hear that. All they care about is today's numbers. So just that very structure and that focus of the financials quarter by quarter get in the way. Quite frankly, I think one of the trends that we're seeing right now on the carrier side is more and more carriers outsourcing their claims to third-party administrators. And I think part of what's driving that is it's a way to get out from under the problems of the legacy claim systems and the problems of that chasing the quarterly goal, and show a positive financial impact and hand that off to somebody else. But the other thing I have to mention is quite frankly, the regulations inhibit change. Workers' compensation is the most highly regulated line of insurance there is. I mean, think about it. Everything we do has regulations around it. What you pay, when you pay, how you pay, the color of the form, the font of the form, the color and the font of the posters. You can go on and on and on. And all of these things make change very difficult. And I'll give you an example. I was at the WCI Conference, which is a regulatory conference, about 3 weeks ago, and there was an extensive discussion around the fact that there's still several states that require paper checks to be sent to injured workers. So think about that for a second. Think about when's the last time you received a paper paycheck. It's probably been 20 plus years for me. But there are several states that mandate a paper check. And so, what should be a fairly simple innovation, allowing different forms of payment, allowing debit cards, allowing direct deposit into a bank account, some states flat out prohibit it in their regulations. And then some states where they've allowed that flexibility, they'll still have language in their statutes that require an anti-fraud warning to be printed on the back of a check, which is kind of impossible to do with a direct deposit into a bank account. So the regulations themselves get in the way of change.
Yeah. At that same conference, there was a discussion around artificial intelligence. And some of the regulators had no idea that AI is a part of nearly every payer today. Many of us have already deployed tech tools, whether it's RPA, robotic process automation, AI, machine learning, and ChatGPT. We're down that path. It's a matter of adoption and how does the industry embrace that to move forward. And so with that, Scott, you referenced the technology's here. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts around using data, AI, machine learning in new ways. What are some of the ways in which your team's working on that?
Yeah, so I probably take the long way to the answer on that. So I've been at this for 30 plus years now. I've been at Sedgwick over 25 years, but I started on a desk. I'm a claims guy, right? Actually happened to sit next to that gentleman down there back in the day. But when I joined the Sedgwick organization, what we set out to do, and I don't think that's really changed, is there were kind of these three pillars of what we were focused on. One was creating a great experience for the person that we were trying to help, right? That was the first thing. The second was there was this whole focus on total cost of risk. So we get caught up in a lot of this other stuff, but there's this big number out there called the total cost of risk, and you all know what that is. Then the third is we're representing companies and brands. So the third being focus on their brand. So those three pillars continue to exist today at Sedgwick, but they've evolved. And they had to evolve because things have changed, technology has changed. So to Mark's point about some of the states that still require paper, it's kind of funny, by the way, the welcome packets that we still have to send out in certain states. Do you think anyone reads those? I don't know. I mean, it's just a bunch of paper. Does anyone even still go to their mailbox? I mean, things like that. But so there's been a lot of evolution. So those pillars of focus and what we're trying to do as an industry and in our organization continue to be the same, but have evolved. But when I think of technology, and again, a lot of it's there, and to Mark's point about the ability to invest in tech, and that is challenging for publicly traded organizations. Sedgwick being privately held, I think we have maybe a different approach and focus. So we do invest hundreds of millions of dollars every year because of this. We're trying to create a better everything, right? And the three things I focus on, I say it all the time, it's kind of the 3 E's. If you're gonna invest a bunch of money, 7, 8, 9 figures, you have to achieve 3 things with whatever you're doing. The first is about the efficiency of the process, right? And everyone wants to buzz about that. So ChatGPT, Sidekick is our product, but everyone wants to talk about making the process more efficient, giving examiners, claims professionals the opportunity to be great at what they do by getting rid of some of the process and making them more efficient. Check, agreed, that should do that. The next is effectiveness. So end of the day, again, we're trying to drive down a total cost of risk. We're trying to spend less money, great health care, healthy return to work, but it's really about trying to control costs, so a more effective solution. So the efficiency of the process, the effectiveness of the result of the process, right? Very important. Then the third is the experience. And again, I said that started 25 years ago when I was pushing claims for Sedgwick, and today, I don't think there's anything more important than the experience of the person we're trying to help. So I know there are a lot of folks that think, oh man, if you bring in technology, all this AI cool stuff, that you're going to be able to, eliminate adjusters and, we're going to automate the process and all this other stuff. No, you're not. That's not what it's about. It's not about that at all. It's actually about those other 3 things, creating a better engagement, creating efficiency and effectiveness, because we're still going to need claims professionals to do the things that they're great at, right? And at the same time, somebody who got hurt that didn't want to call you today is going to call you, and they want to talk to a human being, right? They want to have an experience with you that you're there to help them, have compassion, the whole caring counts thing. So if you invest technology and you go after those three things and keep them in mind, I think you will be effective. The last thing I will say around the experience, and I mentioned it a couple minutes ago about the pandemic changed us, changed our behavior, changed how we viewed people. We started thinking of people as, people we were trying to help, right? They were injured, or whatever the reason was that they weren't at work. They were concerned about the experience, so we were leveraging all this technology to say, hey, it's gonna be all right, right? And if you could deliver that message to every single workers' compensation claim, it's the first thing you do, that it's gonna be all right and I'm here to help you, things are gonna go all right. All the things, the effects of a claim going awry or whatever, all those things go away if they trust you're trying to help them and do the right thing. So, long-winded way, Kimberly, I think if you're gonna invest tech, and you should, and everyone is, it's gotta focus on the efficiency of the process, which again exists today, the effectiveness of the process, the auto adjudication, all that stuff, it exists today. And then the last thing, which I personally think is the most important, is the experience of the person we're trying to help.
So that was really great, Scott. There's one other area I want you to touch on. I feel like over the last 3 years, for sure, moving from data analytics to data science and building out data lakes and use of third-party data, what's your take on the importance of that or how it's evolving?
Yeah, data is going to be a good predictor and indicator of what's next, right? And it can drive, with proper AI and, again, rich, captured, quality data, it can drive a different performance, a different result, I think a different experience. But again, that's one of those things where, there is a lot of data out there. And, we live in this world of interfaces and APIs and all this stuff, so the data is rich and actually is captured. Right, so when I think about what we're doing with ChatGPT, right, the sidekick. So we're actually not only using AI to read medical notes and legal documents and summarize it for the adjusters, creating efficiency for them, but it's making that data rich. We're now able to capture data. So that's kind of like the holy grail, right, is that's what you want to get to. So I think, again, a lot of the data exists. I think predictive and all that other stuff is there. But I think if you can really capitalize on all the data, it can drive a different underwriting performance, I think a different claim result, just about a different everything. So it's there, and again, I think data and analytics and data science and all the predictive stuff has been embraced for the most part. I just think we're just on the cusp of it really being leveraged.
Yeah, and for those of you squirming in your seat, when we talk chat, GPT, or the cloud, keep in mind, and I say this wherever I am in the world, AI and these tech tools help our humans be more human. We are not in the business of taking out adjusters or nurses. Stakeholders will be here. What we need to do is drive efficiencies, and our topic last year on talent, that's one of the reasons we have to do it. We're in the business of caring for injured workers, and these tech tools help our humans be more human.
Julie, what would you add around the topic of data, AI, modeling, that sort of thing?
Yeah, what I would say is there's two things. Number one, we have to recognize the relevance, and then I think we recognize a lot more of how technology can help execute in our industry. The other is we have to be ready for it. Technology has always been ahead of us. I remember being at Kohl's and someone talking about, we have the ability, if somebody hovers, looking at jeans, we can throw them a coupon. And they're like, oh no, don't do that because they'll think Big Brother is watching, and now that's become a regular part of everything that we do. We can't search online without our Facebook, everything popping up of that same product or theme that we are looking at. So technology is always ahead, of where we're thinking and what we're able to do. So I think it's how do we start to get more in line? And I think too, the more technology advances, I'm the first one when I call on a phone and I get AI, I'm like 000, representative. I don't want to interact with that. But as connectivity and the machine learning gets more refined, and we're able to actually simulate a better experience, more and more of us will, I think, adopt and align with technology. But for our industry, for us to not become, extinct, or for us to close down on opportunities, I think we have to start to get ahead of, or at least matching, where technology capabilities are to, again, solve some of the big challenges.
Vin, what would you add?
Yeah, I think it's really tactical, right? When you think about process and think about, let's take medical-only claims, for example. Light touch, bills come in, bills get paid. If we're able to use technology to make that a very easy transaction, we allow adjusters to focus on those claims that actually matter. Let's face it, we're a war on talent. And in my past roles as a risk manager, we always struggled with making sure that we had the right number of adjusters that were handling the claim volume. And if we continue to see these problems or these issues with having the adjusters in the seat handling our claims, why can't we lean on technology to be able to process those claims that are very, very extremely light touch in order to use that opportunity for the claims that really, really matter, right? So if we're able to focus on the process itself and how do we leverage technology with the process, that gets us to, to get to a point where we can manage claims outcomes a bit better, particularly those claims that matter, which are the lost time claims.
Yeah.
Right? So, and when I think also about the issues around cost stabilization, right? We all know that there's cost escalation, there's all these things that are happening with respect to claims, not only with workers' comp, but also with liability and auto. But how can we use that technology? And there's a ton of data out there, right? Mm-hmm. So, a back injury claim is a back injury claim is a back injury claim, right? We all know kind of in our own minds how much is it going to cost. So how come we're not using that technology to be much more predictive, particularly with, if you're a risk manager and you have a captive insurance company and you have to, really kind of understand where you're going to wind up with your accruals versus what you put aside, Yeah. And using the predictive analytics technology to know whether or not if there's specific factors related to that claim are going to put you over or under is going to be critically important to you to manage, your claim accruals as well.
Yeah. I think, too, we look at technology today as helping to improve a process. And I guess in part it's related to that across the board. But think about equipment, or we get in a vehicle and that vehicle can now tell us maybe the safest route to take, not just the quickest route. If we were unfortunate to have an accident, maybe that vehicle can now report back specifically where it's injured or how it's been impacted, creating an opportunity for faster appraisals, faster pay, less fraud. All of those things could be potentials in the very short or near future. There's already technology that could help us to achieve those things and reduce even overall, fraud, speed, cost in our industry.
It's interesting, Julie. So the whole telematics thing, right? That does exist, right? Where the car will tell you what happened when the accident occurred, right?
Yeah.
If you have cameras, you can pretty much recreate the entire event. That technology's been out there for years, and all the stuff we keep talking about has been out there for a while. And Vinny talked, about the kind of the low severity medical only files. You kind of know what the outcome's going to be, right?
Right.
A couple of visits to a doctor, prescription here, get them back to work healthy, right? You kind of know what's going to happen. And maybe the reluctance on our part as an industry to embrace technology is because of the human element, right? Because you're talking to a human being. Maybe that's why. Because we do it in auto, we do it in property, we do it in credit card programs and stuff like that. We do automation all over the place, but in comp, we're just kind of a little bit slow walking into it. And maybe rightfully, people just worry about that experience of that injured worker, and you want to make sure they're taken care of. Because it goes even further. I mean, it's not just auto adjudicating a medical only file, but we have clients, probably in this room, that want to treat them with, white glove service. So call them 14 times, do all this different stuff, and we know it's a file that will resolve itself in 16 days. So there's that, again, that's maybe I could get behind the fact that it's a human being and you're caring about them a lot and you're in their experience. I get that. But at the same time, being an adjuster now is hard. It's like super hard. So the days way back when you had 150 or 175 files and you scribbled on a bill and you threw it in a bucket and it was stuff like that, and those days are over, right? I mean, you got adjusters that are pushing 110, 120 files, and it is the hardest job out there. It really is challenging, right? There's so many things firing at them. All this world of data and interface, it's like there was so much information coming at an adjuster, and they still have to do all those expert things and take care of a human being. So, again, rambling a little bit, but it almost is. It's almost a requirement as we move forward that we have to embrace technology to allow claim professionals to be excellent at what they do, and it's not going to cause an adverse experience for the injured worker. So,
Kimberly, anything else you want to add on this before I go to the next topic?
Yeah, when we think about process, because we've spoken a lot around process and that we're very process driven, a number of years ago, and I may have even said it from this stage, I was a little over the black belts, just leaning a process and leaning a process and leaning a process, and really began to think more about the journey. And now we talk about experience all the time. And so your companies have some form of a digitization roadmap. Your company is thinking about technology, and that's true if you're a startup, probably more so than others, but we're all on this digitization journey. And what I would say is, from the chair with which you sit, how would technology move your customer base, your employee experience, the service of the injured workers, the regulators you work with, you're an attorney getting the information back to your payer? And, I could sit here and say utilization review could benefit, reserves, the way we have our legal plans. Scott mentioned unstructured data, being able to now have natural language processing to pull out words and be able to make those key elements in claims decisions, utilization review decisions, medical, return to work. It is here, and I think that sometimes because of the massive data, people don't know where to go. But you have experts in your company that are already working with your data and tech, if not you. So get a seat at the table. Get your friction points, what's not working in that journey, and work with the people in your organization, or as Julie said, others that can come in and give you suggestions.
All right, let's move now to a discussion of what we can and should be doing. I mean, there's many different reasons to embrace change right now in technology, including talent shortages and enhancing the injured worker experience. Julie, I've heard you talk about the fifth industrial revolution. Tell us about that and why you think that should be pushing us towards change.
Yeah, well, I think, the fourth industrial revolution was a lot about how can we bring together technology to improve processes and automate. The fifth industrial revolution will be more about how do we work together, human to computer or human to technology, and become more efficient. There's three kind of main components, I think, to this next industrial revolution. The first is really trust. We see companies right now trying to figure out, can we trust applications like ChatGPT? And what they're doing is trying to also look at how does that technology, that learning capability, how do we make sure that that's so refined that we can rely upon the information that's coming? The other part of trust is how we vet trust all the time in every situation. We don't believe everything we hear and see. So I saw even a commercial this morning about voting and making sure that what pops up as images and things like that, how do you vet those to make sure that they're truly accurate statements? The same thing is happening with how we're going to look at these different technologies that really can think or garner information. We're going to be testing it. How refined is that information? How much can I trust it? So that's the first part. The second is really about training. So today, I think many of us, and I know I do, like I get this thing and I give it to my teenage daughter and say, please set it up for me. We can no longer do that. We have to be self-starters. We don't have to learn how it was made. We don't have to code. We don't have to invent AI or different methodologies, but we really have to learn how it's used, because in our careers, we can't pass off to another generation or to another person that has interest, something that could be really relevant to us. The other thing about training, which I found really interesting as I was thinking about this, is that according to the Future of Jobs reports, 65% of the jobs that we know today will be different in the future for kids that are in school today. When we look back at some of the industrial revolutions around training, we actually find that like when machinery was coming into place, they created just the kids in school to start to learn in classroom row settings. That way, when they got into the world of working, they were used to working in a row, in an assembly line. It's really interesting that our training as an organization, as ourselves, and as a community, we really need to look at how accepting we are of different types of training that will prepare us for the future of how we will interact and engage with technology. And then the last is together with technology. And, together is, again, I've talked about it a little bit, is the refinement of all these things where we can greater trust it. We know what the possibilities are. And I think towards Scott's point, sometimes we maintain the control because we think the human element or whatever, but how much more significant can it be when you really recognize how much faster you can make decisions, how you can have that person side by side. Years ago, when medical management came into place, I remember, all the TPAs would make a big deal about, hey, my adjuster sits right next to the nurse and they can work in conjunction. Well, think about that in terms of technology. And that, again, is now our seat next to us in all of our jobs, helping us to be better decision makers, bring more relevance to our organization, and potentially speed in how we're doing things. So that's the future, I think, of the fifth industrial revolution, and a little bit insight.
I love that. Technology sits next to us.
Vin, what are your thoughts about what we can and should be doing right now?
Yeah, I think it's really time to get to a point where we have this consciousness around continuous improvement. During my time when I was risk manager at Raytheon, I was trained in Six Sigma while I was there. So there's this cycle of constant improvement. And so how do we bring this back to the process, right? I'm always circling back to process, right? So know that the process that we have is within a construct of what has been put together by regulators. So why isn't it time now that we get the right people with the right minds from all sides of the business together to sit down at the table and think through what the status quo, what the current state is, and build out the future state? So if we're thinking about using technology in order to improve processes and do all these other things, but the construct is rooted in a very manual, paper-driven, heavy-laden process, guess what? At some point in time, it's going to break. So the entire process needs to be reviewed, and so that there's the opportunity to optimize the process. The end-to-end process needs to get optimized in that way. Now you can think through end-to-end processes with respect to AI, the billing pieces, how employees receive their money electronically, the transparency that we talked about with the Domino's pizza tracker, right? Other things that are specifically related to improving the injured worker employee experience. Because when we think about high litigation rates, what drives, now I know there are a lot of attorneys in the room, but hopefully all of you are on our side, right? But think about the things that drive employees to attorneys, right? It's a frustration with the process. There's a distrust with the process. If we can change the construct of the process as a whole and use technology to provide the level of transparency that's needed, then I think we might be able to get somewhere.
I like that.
Kimberly, what are your thoughts on what we can and should be doing?
Well, first we need to think bigger. And I think within our area of the business, do bring those stakeholders together. Know your friction points. What are the opportunities to not only sell your business, but the business that you have internally? And so you've got to have a voice and a seat at the table, and don't give up. If you're not curious, you won't know. So learn from others, think bigger, and I think ultimately the time is now. I remember being on this stage a number of years ago, and we talked about the evolution of workers' comp and rethinking workers' comp. And you know what? The items we talked about then and shared, it's here because of the technology transformation. So I think we need to individually spend time, if we haven't recently, revisit that, dust it off, and maybe next year this time we'll be talking about how we've seen significant change over the last 12 months.
Scott, after hearing from everybody else, what are your thoughts on what we can and should be working on right now?
Yeah, so I actually chuckled at your comment about when you call customer service. I do that every time. All you have to do is talk 2 more words and you're going to be fine, but no, I need to talk to a human being, which is crazy, right? But that's a perfect example of the challenge, right? So what do you have, 5 generations still in the workforce, 4 for sure. Yeah. The 5th one, the greatest generation, is kind of moving out, but they have a different approach to how they want to communicate and how they want to be communicated with, right? So I think I find it interesting and that we're trying to embrace all this, but at the same time, I think the challenge, or what I think we should do next, is kind of a ground game approach, right? We can cause change. You can cause change as an employer, as a service provider, as a carrier. You can cause change. Boiling the ocean is changing the construct that Vinny was talking about, right? This whole process and this system. That's a bigger effort. But I think right now you can embrace innovation and technology. You can cause change inside your program, your company, or what have you, because it does exist. But it's going to just take a little bit of effort. It just takes individually, each person embracing what's available to them and doing it for the right reasons, right? We're trying to create a better place, a better experience, a better world, if you will. So yeah, I think everyone just needs to take on to their piece and run with it. It's there.
Scott, what are some of the communication tools back to the injured worker experience that you think about deploying or are using in the process?
Yeah, I mean, so all the old stuff's there, right? The old school stuff of phone calls and emails. Maybe people still send letters, don't know. But the idea of chatting and texting, that's a now thing. It's a today thing. We do it all, right? And everyone does it. And I think there needs to be, again, if we do more and more of that, it's this whole world of immediate gratification, and your world operates off of a phone, which is what everyone wants. Everyone's got a phone in here. You probably looked at it a couple times just now. But the idea that you have all this available, immediate gratification, instant resolution, that's where we are now. We just need to do more of it. So chatting, texting, emailing, sure. All that stuff exists. You can use AI-driven chatbots to actually answer most of the questions that we know are coming. We know what the questions are. So yeah, it's really about embracing the stuff that is available to us, and trying to communicate with those different demographics and different generations. And Cedric is a good example. Millennials are now our largest demographic, population-wise in our organization. So they are very different than me, the Gen X guy. And but I think you have to have all the methods available to them. But I think the more and more we embrace things like that are driven through apps and through phones, I think the better off we are. What's an interesting statistic is, so we do a lot of at Cedric, we do obviously a ton of comp claims, but we also do a ton of non-OC stuff. And the utilization levels of our apps in chat and text in the non-OC world is just around 90%. In the work comp world, it's about 30. Why is that? Why is that? I mean, it's the same technology, it's effectively the same process, an employee benefit. Granted, it's a direct access to your benefits that way, but it's about health care, it's about getting back to work, it's about indemnity payments, it's the same thing. But for some reason over here, in benefits, it's a 90% lift that people want to communicate that way, that's the way they do. But in workers' compensation, it's almost shunned. It's
Yeah, and
the
for
oddest
those
thing.
of you that might be thinking, well, there's medical and it's complex, the majority of claims are medical only and resolving very quickly. So keep that in mind when Scott references the 30% utilization on the comp side. Julie, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, what I would add is, finding the place to start is probably one of the hardest things.
Yep.
So, one of my just talking about what I alluded to in the very beginning is there is not a company out there today that is not looking for or worried about their talent base. And workers' compensation can play really well into that. So it's looking at, okay, as it relates to workers' comp, then what helps us as an organization related to some of the goals we have in our organization? So let's just take talent for a minute. So we know return to work is important, communication with that injured worker, the experience of that injured worker. Also, they'll come back to full duty. So maybe you start with, what are my organizational goals and how can I connect there? And then the next part is, how do I go take discovery? Most of you are working with a carrier or a TPA, or you're here at WCI. Go to the vendor show and start looking at different things that would help drive after some goals that you might have for improving the employee injured worker experience. That can be communication and all the tools that are out there that can enhance communication, and it can be other technologies and things. But focus on one goal that you're trying to achieve in your program, and then discover what are all the possibilities of how we can deliver something new, innovative, but help your program related to, cost and driving after that talent piece.
And I want to
or
circle back
whatever.
to you for a minute. You had mentioned some, not necessarily straight through process automation, but opportunities to maybe have light touch. And there is, I just mentioned the medical only, so high frequency, low severity. Will you just expand on your thinking around that? Because I know you spent time at Amazon.
Yeah.
Really working in that area.
Yeah, we thought through, first we talked about data lakes earlier, right? So one of the big incentives that we had was to build out this huge data lake that had all of this information in, not only for claims, but for renewal information and other data as well that was accumulated across the business. So that was an effort to streamline the process. But when you think about the large volume of workers' comp claims, at Amazon you had millions of employees, right? So I think globally you had 2 or 3 million, but within the United States it was almost 1 million. So you can think about the claim volume that occurs as a result of that. You have to figure out ways of how these claims can be self-adjudicated, or else you'll be mirrored down in process. So the claims team that was part of my department was over 130 odd people, one of the largest out there, but found that a lot of those folks came into our claims department from HR, from safety. So they weren't technically claims experts. So how do you get them up to speed and move them quickly so that they can get to a level to handle claims with a light touch? Yeah. And the ability to use AI, predictive modeling, and all of those things within a construct of a decision-making model helps move things along faster, gives the employees that may not have had the claims background the opportunity to learn until they get more comfortable and to a point where they can handle things a bit better and more efficiently.
Yeah.
So The opportunity here is to create straight line processes with why no decision making based on the characteristics of what occurred, what the medical bill is, and we talked about earlier about the medical community, the non-op community, having the technology in place to make that same decision making. It's no different.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Same.
So how come that can't be applied in the workers' comp side with respect to these high volume, low severity type cases? That should be something that's automatic.
Yeah, thank you. Given your vision, and I know we've hit on it a few different ways this morning, so thank you for digging in.
Scott, you want to give your final thoughts before we let Kimberly wrap us?
Yeah, it's interesting, Vinny, the stuff you're talking about. It made me think that, this whole idea, we're trying to talk about innovation and AI and using technology and all this other stuff. The reality is, like I said, it exists in all the things you want to ask the question about today. It exists today. One of the things we were talking about in prep was how a lot of other industries actually already embrace it. They just don't talk about it. They just don't talk about it. So whether it's auto adjudicating an MO or a car accident, a credit card claim, whatever it is, all that stuff exists today. It's just for some reason we pause at the last moment when it comes to a human being, and I just find that interesting. But no, I think we are, we talked about the fifth industrial revolution, right? We're right now in the age of AI. You think of the age of enlightenment back, the 16th, 17th century, where, one of the greatest inventions ever, the printing press, allowed information to be shared and knowledge to be built on. That was then. We're now in this world of AI where that's going to happen exponentially, but it's right in front of us. It's just we can't fear it. We have to have parameters and rules around it, but we all need to embrace it, especially in the worlds that we control.
Kimberly, wrap us up.
All right. Hard to believe we are already wrapping up such a wonderful conversation today. I think we all can take away, we could be a little more curious than maybe we are, even if you're the most curious person in the room. We could probably assess our risk aversion or risk appetite. Mindset matters in so much of what we do, and coming out of the pandemic, it's a really good time for us to reset personally with our teams and our partners. I like what Scott was saying around when you're looking at investments, what are your priorities? And I think we all could say what he chose, efficient, effective, and improving the experience. With that, you'll drive outcomes. You'll drive outcomes for your customers, regardless of the stakeholder part of the industry that you're in. I really enjoyed Julie's trust, training, and together with technology. We've spent time on this stage talking about training, knowledge transfer from our more senior adjusters to new entrants, training around the technology, being advocates for our injured workers and helping them on their journey. That's part of the training, but we need to be more cognizant, thoughtful, and intentional around the use of technology there. And I think at the end, I'll say it again, this isn't to get rid of our people. Our people are at the heart of everything we do. The injured workers are at the heart of every employer. We all are here for them, and so if we can embrace technology transformation and be better together, our industry will begin to see that pendulum shift from an industry that isn't technology focused to one that's leading the pack in insurance. So thank you again to WCI. We actually will be broadcasting this session via Outfront Ideas, and so we're thankful to WCI for filming that. Outfrontideas.com will have the video coming up in the next probably 6 to 8 weeks. And Outfront Ideas is sponsored by Cedric and Safety National. So many thanks to them for supporting us over the years. And thank you to our great guests today, who without, we wouldn't have had such a rich conversation.
Have a hand for the panel.